So I think that now we're ready to get into the introduction. For those who don't know, this may or may not turn into a podcast episode. Jay Z, you want to spill the tea?
Yes, this is our first informal, soon to be formal, a new podcast series called DevNull Podcast by Charm. I'm your co-host Jay Z. I'm the COO at Charm. And Bash, everyone knows Bash.
I am Bash Bunny. I am the head of developer relations at Charm. I'll tell you a bit about.
DevNull,
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
yeah, yeah, no, all good. DevNull is a new monthly podcast that we're hosting on every second Thursday of the month. So the next one is on February 8th. We will be talking all things open source, developer experience, tooling, tips and tricks, as well as inviting some epic guests that you all will hear from today. And some of you have already heard from in the green room. And for those of you on YouTube, we are streaming right now. The recording will be available on charm.sh/YT. Now, Bash, I'm going to kick it over to you to start off what we're talking about today.
That sounds great. Jay Z, do you mind upping your gain on your mic just a little bit? Okay. So there are times where I've felt kind of in over my head trying to tackle a really challenging problem, especially when it's the first time. If it's tough enough, I might even just step back and say, you know what, this is too hard. I can't wrap my brain around how to solve this problem. And today's guests are people who I think are consistently tackling these projects that would make me scream and run the other way. I get the project scaries. They seem to be the most fearless developers that I've come across. And we're going to get into some of their stories on how they tackle these really challenging tasks without letting it be overwhelming or taking them away from their learnings. Without further ado, let's get into the intros for some of our speakers. Let's start off with TJ. Do you want to give us a little bit of like who you are and yeah, just your little intro. I'll ask you more questions after.
Sure. Hey, everybody. I'm TJ. I'm a soon to be unemployed developer, so you should really listen to my opinions. I'm recently started going full time on Twitch and YouTube, and trying to make really cool stuff. We do a lot of things with NeoVim. I'm on the NeoVim core team, so I've been doing open source work for about 7 or 8 years now. I'm the author of Telescope NVim, and I've done a lot of other stuff in the NeoVim space.
Perfect. And Moss, do you mind giving us a little intro on yourself?
Yeah, for sure. So, hey everyone, I'm Moss. I'm a developer at Charm. I've been working here for about a year and a half. Got to work on some really cool projects. Some of you might have used them. So, I helped write Gum, VHS, Pop, and our latest tool, Hunt. And before that, I used to work at Shopify and was a developer there. Got to work on a bunch of different teams like augmented reality and virtual reality, security, and developer tools. Uh, so yeah, that's just a bit about me.
I keep forgetting where I mute. Hee hee. And awesome. Thanks for coming, Moss. And low level learning, do you mind giving us a little bit about yourself and what kind of content you do?
Yeah, hey, so my name is Low Level Learning. I also go by Ed. Both of those are fine. Professionally, I'm actually a cybersecurity researcher. I've been in the offensive security game for about 10 years now. But in my free time as a hobbyist and also on YouTube, I do traditional development, working on a bunch of different platforms that I find very interesting. Right now, I'm working on a few using React, all that good web stuff. Yeah, happy to be here.
And then last but certainly not least, Rox, do you want to give a little intro on yourself?
Hey, what's up, YouTube? It's your boy, Rox Codes. I build tools for YouTubers. I do like little SaaS tools and slowly building up to big boy startups. This is not official, but it is official. I have signed the papers, so you'll hear about it soon. I just sold my first big tool, and so I'm now working on some new stuff. So all of this stuff will be very relevant. And yeah, I used to make a lot of content. I used to Twitch stream, which is how I know all these kids. But now I just make SaaS tools for YouTubers. So like Tej, for legal reasons, I am unemployed, self-employed.
Great. Sounds like we have a whole bunch of exciting but very experienced, soon to be unemployed expert guests. Welcome.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. And let's get right into the nitty gritty on what we want to talk about. So I really want to hear from each of you what you've built that you are most proud of. And I'll start again with TJ.
It's a tough question to pick, but probably I think the thing that I'm most proud of would be Telescope, which is a fuzzy finder for NeoVim that's achieved like pretty good popularity. I'm just happy because I mostly made it for me and like joking around on stream and having fun, and then it turned out other people like the same thing, and a lot of people have liked it a lot, and I think it inspired a lot of other people to go and try and make their own stuff too.
I love that. And we've actually got a few of the guests that are streamers here. So TJ, Rox, and Low Level are all live streamers. Let's go to Low Level next. What is it that you've built that you are really proud of?
Yeah, hey, so for context on this one, I got into web dev a long time ago, back when like jQuery was mainstream, and then I went to college and got a real job, not in web dev, so I was kind of out of it for a while. And I came back recently because of YouTube and all the friends that I've made here that are all big web dev people trying to get back into it, and kind of in self-teaching. And this is not a plug, this is just what I'm talking about, what I'm proud of. I made my course website, Low Level Academy. And the reason I'm proud of that is because I was able to leverage, I think, a lot of information that's online and was able to build it without any formal education. And I just love when people are able to take information online and build a thing that they like really, really are proud of. And I'm super proud of that website. Yeah, it's a React website, uses AWS and all this other stuff in the back end. But yeah, I'm super proud of that.
Yeah, that's huge. I think there's a lot of techniques that a lot of self-taught developers have that you don't really learn in the mainstream. So really cool that you applied that into your own way of teaching. And maybe let's hop over to Ross. Wrecked. Let's hop over to Rox next. What are you most proud of that you've built?
Oh, I hope his mic stops working and it's just silent. That'd be so good.
Oh no. Rox, we can't hear you.
Uh-oh.
Okay. Twitter Spaces is great.
No, that's what he's most proud of. That's it, All right, next.
Okay. Next. Okay, let's go to Moss. Moss, what have you built that you're most proud of?
Yeah, so I think one of the projects that I got to work on at Charm was definitely one of the most ones that I'm most proud of, which is VHS, which is a sort of a terminal automation as code, which produces like terminal GIFs. So for that, we just built it because we were working on a different project that needed like demos for GIFs, and I hate doing stuff manually, so I decided to automate terminal GIF recording. And for that, I'm really proud of it because I got to write my own like little programming language. It's not really a programming language because it doesn't have like loops and variables and stuff, but it's like a DSL for describing terminal actions. I wrote like a tree sitter grammar for it. I just learned a lot overall. The language even made its way like into NeoVim, Helix, and Vim itself, which was like a super cool thing to see, like something that I built make its way into editors that I use. So that's one thing I'm super proud. One thing I built that I'm super proud of.
I'm proud of you too, for the record. I feel like there's so many times where I'm seeing what you're building and I'm like, how do you even start with that? So let me lead that into the next question. Rox, I will get back to you, poor thing. Let's lead that into kind of the next question. How do you I'm assuming you don't just know what steps you're going to need to take in order to implement this thing right off the bat, right? So what gives you the confidence to take that first step, and how do you decide what that first step is?
Yeah, so for a project like VHS, I've done like a lot of like automation scripts before, and projects like that. So with regards to how do I know what I want to build or like how to start, it's more like I just want to automate this process, and like I have no idea how I'm gonna do it. I just know that this is what I need to do. So with VHS, for example, it started off as like just this really hacky sort of Go library that you would essentially like write Go code to control a browser, and that browser would be a terminal, and then you could like type stuff into the terminal and like control the browser through code, which is kind of what I wanted. Um, and then later on, it evolved like, oh, this would be cool, like if you didn't have to write Go code so that anyone could use it. So then it became like, okay, we need like a little like DSL, like domain specific language to do that. And then it sort of becomes like, oh, I don't know how to write a language. Okay, let's do some research. Okay, you need like a Lexer and parser, um, and it was kind of overwhelming to be like, okay, I have to write a language for this now. There was moments where like, oh, it could be simpler just to have it like as a Go library, but I read this like Thorsten Ball wrote this really nice book called Writing an Interpreter in Go, and I just read it, and it was actually pretty simple. I just followed like the kind of code examples, and it turned out to be easier than I thought it was going to be. It's definitely still tough to write a language, but it's not as overwhelming as when you break it down into parts and just like take stuff step by step. I think the biggest help was that I made it like a super hacky kind of Go library, and then kind of evolved the project over time instead of just trying to do everything all at once.
Yeah, definitely. I think when you're looking at it as this massive project, it I think that's when it's most overwhelming. But when you know these steps that you can kind of take, okay, well, even just knowing the next step is huge because then it's like, okay, at least I'm not stuck on the spot. I can do this one thing and that'll bring me one step closer to that finished product. TJ, I saw you had some reactions there. Do you have anything to say about what Moss shared?
I mean, first off, big recommendation for Thorsten's book. If you're ever interested in getting a little bit more sort of just introduced to a lot of the concepts of what it would take to make a programming language, and at least, at sort of a high level how they work, would definitely recommend. I think it's interpreterbook.com. And then there's a sequel, I think it's just compilerbook.com. They're really approachable, and really good. So definitely would recommend. And then the only other thing to go along with that is, sometimes people I think get like kind of afraid when they're tasked with a big task in front of them and they don't know what like the optimal next step is, right? I feel, but like Moss, what was cool is that you were just going for like a next step. And I think one of the big things to like be able to build something that's larger is like not being afraid to occasionally make a mistake or choose the wrong option or do something incorrectly. Because especially for code, you could just like delete it. It's just like it's not like you built a building, you built like the wrong factory. Like when we build the wrong factory, we just delete the Java class. You know what I mean? You don't have to delete like a whole building. So the opportunity cost is like a lot lower to just go back and try again. And I think that's really cool how like Moss started with Go and then it's like, oh, it'd be cooler if we did this, and then just like went for it. That's really cool.
Yeah, I'll open the floor to just if anyone has any questions or comments. Like I think everyone here has pretty good discourse. I think it'd be great.
Yeah, just I really like that point about like just deleting the code. One thing that helps me with like stuff like daunting tasks is it's just like text, and even smaller than that, it's just like ones and zeros. So it's really, if you really break it down, it's just like text and like ones and zeros, and like you can figure it out given enough time. Um, so I really like that analogy about the we just delete the code or like just change. It's not the opportunity cost of deleting is not crazy.
Yeah, kind of in that line of thinking, what TJ said about like, you know, if you build the wrong building, you're kind of screwed. With code, it's not like that. And kind of in the same line of thought, like it's really, really hard to break computers. Like there's only so many things you can do that'll actually make your computer like explode or delete your files or whatever. So it, like, even if you don't know what you're doing at all on a project, just write code. And like worst case scenario, like Cheech said, you wrote the wrong code, just delete it and try again. And eventually, you know, infinite number of monkeys on typewriters, you will get it right, and you're learning along the way too, which is important.
Yeah, I can vouch that I also tried the Tej method of trying to simulate 1,000 monkeys on a typewriter.
Yeah,
And yeah, it's the throw out code thing is like, as much as I hate agreeing with Tej, is the realest, most true thing on the planet. Because you just like, if I have to build something big, right? Like when I sat down to build like thumbnail test, and it was like, how do you build an A/B tester for YouTube thumbnails? I was like, I don't know, but I can guess what some of the code will look like. And so I'm just going to write that part of the code. And then once I have that, I'm going to try and figure out what the next part would look like, and have no requirement of like, it has to be good, it has to be reusable, it has to be functional, like none of those things matter. You just get it down on paper. And like, a lot of the fear and like struggle comes from overthinking things, and a lot of the best way to stop overthinking it is to just have done any actual part of it and realize that the reality is usually much simpler. And if it's not, you've at least forced yourself to like break it down into small pieces. And even if you don't have all the small pieces figured out, if you figure out one, it's easier to get to the next one.
Yeah,
I
momentum
know
is
it's a
huge.
cliche, but like analysis paralysis is the worst thing a developer can find themselves in. Like if you don't spend time, don't spend 1,000 seconds or whatever looking for the most efficient solution. Spend 1,000 seconds writing code and finding the most efficient solution.
So to question that thought a little bit more, when you do have these moments of analysis paralysis, or in other words, maybe feeling overwhelmed, trying to figure out a solution, how do you, and we can start with low level learning, how do you kind of shift your mindset and recoup? Any kind of tricks of the trade?
Yeah, I mean, so I think the mindset for me, and I think it's all rooted in the fact that I don't like to waste my time because I'm very lazy and I only want to work for so much time. Is just like, instead of spending time analyzing the problem, I like to just get my hands dirty and do the problem. And even if I get it wrong over and over again, I think what I'm doing is I'm developing a kind of a sense of smell. You know what I mean? Like a thing you can't really describe, but like like a sixth sense about in the future what will be the right way to start a project. You know what I mean? And I think you really only get that by trying and failing repetitively. So analysis paralysis, unless you're like tight on budget, or you have to get it right the first time. You know what I mean? Other than like really edge case scenarios like that, I think you're going to spend your time the best by just getting your hands dirty and trying.
Yeah, two things. First, I just want to go on the record and say I also hate it when Rox agrees with me. So like, I just needed to make sure before we got too far that that was on the record. But secondly, um, there's, especially when you're learning, I think either a new area or you're more junior in your career, you just won't have a lot of the same intuitions that you have after you've tried and failed like 100 times on something, right? Or even tried and like iterated. It's not always a failure and like completely deleting the code. And so you should kind of like just expect uh, that, yeah, I'm going to try something and it's probably not going to work. And that's okay. We'll keep trying and like we can do it again. And sometimes that may change later in your career or as you become more familiar with an area of expertise where like, if low level starts some embedded project, he's going to make a lot less silly mistakes than me, right? Because he's done those things before, and he knows it better. And that's good. That's okay. So you can sort of develop some of those intuitions by making those mistakes or learning from the people that have already done it, which I think is like really important to remember as you try out a new project, especially in new areas.
Is there a time, and I'm actually going to ask this of Rox because I know he tinkers, and I know the other guest too tinkers with a lot of projects. Is there a time where you just, you've tried it a bunch, you're overwhelmed, and you just put a pause on that project for any given reason? Or maybe you even quit it. Is there that kind of time when you make that kind of decision, and how is it made?
Yeah, so I mean, I've quit a project before for sure. I've quit a lot of things. I think for me, I guess it also depends on like kind of how you define quitting. But I'll give an example. Like I tried to do AI generated YouTube thumbnails, and so I built out an architecture that worked. It was awful, right? But the code functioned, and that's all that mattered. And I finally got all the way to the end, and I looked at the result, and I was like, I can't do a lot better than this without putting in months of work. Like I'll have to tune a bunch of AI. I'll have to really think a bunch. And so when I looked at the project and I said I'd have to put in months for this to even be passable, I said this is not worth it anymore, and I decided to give up. There's other times where I've gotten like very frustrated with something. My original project, Clipbot, was like kind of generating TikToks and like YouTube Shorts from Twitch clips. So there was like a really long pipeline, and it was very fickle. It would break a lot, and that was very demoralizing. And I'd have people always complaining about this one thing didn't work, or like that 1% of error would always hit, or this or that, and it ended up being more overwhelming than enjoyable. And I was only making like a few $100 a month from it, so it wasn't really worth all the time people were asking of me for me to keep putting time into it. So only when I've either found that it like was not worth the time and the emotional stress to put into the project, and or I didn't feel like I could actually bring it to the quality I wanted to, have I given up on something all in. But in terms of like, building and getting overwhelmed, like just code is hard every day. I mean, every single day, every single hour. If I'm writing code, I'm always 10 minutes away from one bad npm library and just stepping away from the computer for a full day.
You should try not JavaScript sometime. You might enjoy yourself more, Rox.
You should try a language people can pronounce.
Tell them.
I've written Go before.
And now he's paid to shill O'Campbell. That's crazy. That's how this is actually how he retired. He's retired now by O'Campbell.
I heard it was
By
because I did
Campbell.
I heard it was because I did Laravel on stream once and I got fired.
I'd love to hear from anyone else in the panel, like when you felt it's appropriate to drop a project.
Just from I haven't been able to, like I haven't been a programmer for that long in when I can like drop a bunch of projects or like learn from when to drop a project. But the few times I have like quit a project, there's just something more interesting to work on, or a problem that I'm more fit to solve, or just something that I would have more fun on. Um, but if it's something I truly want to finish, I try to learn. Like I don't quit because I can't like do um, something hard. I just try to like, if it is important, if the problem is important enough to solve, you do try to like learn whatever you can so that you can like solve problems easier in the future. But like if it's a project that I just started just like for fun and I just lose interest on it, that's when like I think I quit and like work on something else that I can um, that I think has a better like opportunity cost to pursue, because you can't do everything, which is unfortunate. It would be nice to have like infinite time and resources, but just putting a project on the side, if it does become like Rock said, like not worth the time, or there's things that you can pursue that are better. Um, I find that's when it's like fine to quit a project, but not if it gets like too hard, and you can still learn.
Yeah, I'll say that it super depends on the context. I mean, if it's like for fun project that you're doing to try and learn stuff, there's a really different threshold and like set of reasons for why you might need to quit versus like your company needs this to ship next quarter. So I think there's a huge range, and you'll have lots of different reasons of why you might quit or postpone. Um, and for personal projects, it also depends a lot because some people are trying to turn those into real products, or some people are just using them to learn, or some people are, contributing to something else. And so I think even in those situations for personal projects, there's still a really wide range of when you might want to quit.
Definitely. Actually, speaking of being in that corporate environment, how do you explain to your boss that, hey, my first attempt didn't work out, now I have to push back the deadline? Or do you just account for that in your time estimation? I'm asking the panel, so anyone feel free to jump in.
I look in the mirror. I say, hey, man, it's going to take a while. I say, okay.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, for in like a normal, say like work situation, the really important things are communicating early and often. So for this, the kind of project where this would happen are usually sort of either like underscoped or large, or I don't know exactly. There's a huge range of it, but usually underscoped or very large, and so there's a lot of uncertainty in the project already. So it should not be that your boss says, "Hey, I need you to work on this." And then you're like, "Cool, it'll probably take 3 months." And then you like log off of Slack and then don't say anything until 2.5 months later when you're like, "Actually, it's a 6-month project." Um, so what you should be doing instead is, each week or however often makes sense for the kind of work that you're doing, sort of stating the progress, stating what's been keeping you from making the next step, these kinds of things. And then when you get to, month one, you can say, we actually still have a lot of uncertainty left. We still don't really get how we're going to handle this scenario where we have, users. I know like lots of people, they don't have that scenario, right? Where they actually have users. So maybe that's one of the ones where they're trying to figure out how they're going to actually handle that. But if you're communicating that early, it's clear that you've been iterating and working on it, and your boss can like make an account for that and everybody. And so you need to be doing that early. It can't be in the last week or last 90% of the project. That's way too late to be saying we haven't figured out this tough project. That's way too late. So that would be my advice. And generally, like particularly if you have technical people as your boss, or like formerly technical people, they totally get it because they've also had projects that took 4 times as long as what they thought it was going to be, right? But they can't really get it and give you the benefit of the doubt and help you and do everything if you never tell them, and then you show up in the last week and say that it's impossible. That's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, actually, thinking about this in reverse. So I have an employee now, like in the company that I've been building, and that's 100% accurate to my experience as his boss. Where it's like I'm never upset if he like hits a struggle, or like there's some weird scenario of the YouTube API can't do this or that. But if he hits me with it that day, then we'll hop on a call and we'll figure it out. And I could probably unblock him within an hour or two if I can figure it out. But if he did not do that and he waited a week and he was like, "Hey, I just wasn't able to figure it out," that'd be awful. So definitely like going super heavy on comms and just like talking a lot. You'll be surprised how quickly you can get through some stuff.
Yeah, just to add on to what TJ and Rock said, I think the communication is absolutely key. Like for example, like I did mention VHS, just being like a hacky automation library, which we could have shipped, but like we decided to do a bit of like scope creep and write like our own language so that people could to make it more accessible basically, and that took like a few weeks extra because I had to like I had to learn how to do all that, and just like communicating with your manager or your boss. They're generally understanding, and especially if they're technical, they also have gone through the same experience. So as long as you're not just as long as you're being honest about the work and all of that, I think it's most managers are generally understanding, or maybe I've just had good experiences. But yeah, the communication, just like TJ mentioned early on, is super important.
So going back to the topic of doubt, I'd want to ask the panel here, and maybe starting with low level learning, for especially our newer devs or those newly embarking on personal projects, what are common doubtful thoughts that you had, or have when starting a new project? And part of thinking, like, how can we normalize that? Because you all, the panel here, and many of those sitting are quite seasoned as developers, so it's easy to think that it comes natural to you, but I imagine even with every project there's doubt. So what are those thoughts?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think I'm probably a seasoned dev in certain corners of dev, but like I talked about, my project is a web project, and I have a very minimal web experience. So yeah, I was met with a lot of doubts myself. The doubts manifested as like, oh, I'm not a web dev, like I can't do this, or like, oh man, you haven't coded web stuff since jQuery, like what are you doing writing React, right? And I think the way I overcome those doubts is like, we live in a time where there are quite literally like an infinite number of resources, and as long as you have the time and the grit to fail a couple of times, like Tej and Rock were talking about before, eventually through n repetitions of failure, you will learn something, and you will no longer not be a web dev, or you will no longer be a junior dev, right? So I think I overcome that doubt by just knowing like, this is just a part of the process. The resources exist, put in the time, and you will improve. And I feel like I did. So
I think the other thing is there's some amount of sort of personal, I don't know what to call it besides maybe like grit or understanding that, like, yeah, I'm going to fail sometimes. Okay. That's not going to stop me. And, that's a mix of maybe not caring that other people, think you look stupid, or not caring that, other people are going to try and whatever other people are going to do. It's just whatever. Like, that's not you. And so you just kind of got to decide, like, yeah, I might fail at this project, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to try my hardest for it. Right. Um, and so I think a lot of that is sort of internal motivation and figuring out how to do that and how to motivate yourself and have that mindset, which is like tough and takes practice. But I think it's super helpful, not just for big projects, but like all sorts of different work motivations, that you're just going to say, yeah, I'm going to try my best and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, one of my lessons that I learned pretty early on with streaming was that, I mean, the worst case scenario is like, okay, your code doesn't run. Someone comes in and they say, you're an awful developer. You'll never make it, right? But like, the people that would say that are just projecting their own insecurities. So like, even in the worst case scenario, you're just dealing with someone else's insecurities and code that doesn't work. And eventually, if you hack at the code enough, you can get it working. Like, realistically, you can get it working.
Yeah, I think we live in this world of like, obviously a lot of us are content creators on YouTube and stuff, right? So I think maybe as a new developer, there's always this fear of like, oh man, like if people see my crap code on GitHub, like it's going to get roasted in a YouTube video, or like my senior developer on my project is going to come and yell at me for using use effect here. And yeah, like you're saying, Bash, like I don't think that's real. And if it is, that person, like ignore that person. Like you said, they're just projecting their own insecurities onto you, and it's probably not valid like most of the time.
Yeah, I think even if it's true, like even if you are a bad developer, you can just say, I'm going to try and be better.
Right.
Like they can be right. I don't think you even have to go and say like that they're wrong or whatever. You can just say, yeah, okay, that was bad code. You're totally right. I would love to learn how to make it better. Can you tell me how? And you can turn like negative people's like criticism of you into a way for you to learn, or you might find that they don't have anything constructive to say. And then you're like, oh, so you just didn't like it, but you don't have any reason. Right. So I think, even if someone else wants to give you criticism in a way that's destructive, which is not like a good way to have, a like company running, like there's a whole bunch of other whole bunch of other problems there, right? But you can turn that into something that's positive for you and a learning experience, and turn that around into a way to get better. Even if you just take their advice and say, I don't think it applies, right? And don't do it. You don't have to do what they say. But yeah, I think we don't even have to say that they're projecting or anything else. We can just say, I'm going to keep trying to get better.
Yeah, one of my biggest doubts was like actually sharing like projects that I had built. So it wasn't so much like can I wasn't me doubting like can I build this, but more like oh doubting like will people like this? And kind of how I came over that was through the repetitions of like sharing my code. But like I remember the first time that I shared like an open source project, I was so scared about people kind of gonna be like, oh, this is such a simple project. Why did you build this? But I sort of just kind of pushed past that and tried to share my projects and like ended up getting like really good feedback. But what I was saying is like even if I did get bad feedback, like TJ mentioned, I could just use that and be like, oh, this was a really useless project. I could build more useful stuff and use that feedback like to improve. So even in the worst case, you learn and you improve and you get feedback, and in the best case, it can create opportunities like you can find jobs, which is actually how I got my job at Charm, which was sharing like a terminal slides presentation tool on Reddit, which I was like heavily considering not doing because I was so scared. But in the best case, it can change your life, and in the worst case, you can learn from it and use the feedback, even if it is destructive or constructive, into to improving your projects. So yeah, the biggest doubt was like sharing code, and I would recommend if anyone is like considering like sharing their projects, definitely do it. It can, in the best case, it can change your life, and in the worst case, you can make better projects in the future.
Really appreciate Moss sharing the sentiment there before, you know, especially around other people's thoughts, which I think is a big overarching cloud when conquering any tough project, be it in coding or trying any new thing ever. And so I'm curious to hear from other of the panelists, especially since, you know, some of you are role models in this space. If there were examples that you can think of, you know, about to release a project or conquering doubt, what were the doubtful thoughts? If you'd be open to sharing with the group here.
Every time I've released pretty much anything until like relatively recently, I didn't really like you don't really know what you're doing for a long time. And I think like uncertainty is a lot of where fear comes from and like doubt comes from. And I think a lot of what Tej was kind of saying earlier is, you know, as you and low level as well, like as you get deeper and deeper into this world and do more stuff, you have a lot less of that internal voice and questioning. It's still there, but like you're more used to it being there. You're more used to there being uncertainty, and you're not necessarily as afraid of it. But like you know, similar to Maz, every time I ever tried to post on Reddit, Reddit hates everybody that posts. You get banned from like every subreddit that you ever try to post to if you're trying to shill a project or talk about anything, even if it's free. So that was always super scary. And I think in particular, early in my career with like the YouTube tools, I used to like DM big YouTubers on Twitter, and I'd be like, "Hello, do you want to use my thing?" And a lot of some of them blocked me. So you know, life's hard. But some of them didn't block me, and some of them bought my thing. So you know,
Rox,
you kind
are
of have
you
to eat
sure?
dirt.
Are you sure it wasn't because of that voice that they blocked
No,
you?
no, it was over text, but I think maybe
Drama.
they could guess. That's hurtful. Okay, thank you, Jay-Z. Jay-Z, my friend and confidant.
It
Thank
would have
you.
worked better
Got
if you
you.
had
Got you.
recorded them. Send them a voice message like that on Twitter, DM. Hey guys, I've got a pretty cool YouTube thing.
Try voice memo next time. Might go better. I dare you.
Thanks, team. Thanks for the feedback. If I didn't have enough doubt already.
Thanks for sharing. Thanks for sharing
Yeah,
your intimate thoughts about your doubts, and let us just all stomp on your doubts and make them worse.
I feel so much more doubt.
That's so good.
I think one of the things that's really helpful for like conquering doubt professionally is like, so I mean, work's really important to me, and like I love software development and I want to be a great software developer, but my like value and identity rests in something else. And so like if I write bad code on a particular day, that doesn't make me like a bad person. Right. Maybe, I guess maybe it could. Depends on how bad it is or what. But in general, at least, it's not gonna make me a bad person, right? And so I think if you have your identity resting on people's perception of how your product does or what the results are, you're likely to have a lot of doubt and fear related to the project because your identity is wrapped up into this project and people's perceptions of it. But if you have something else that anchors you and gives you your like identity, then a lot of people online can say your project sucks or it's useless or that you're a terrible programmer, and you can say, well, okay, like okay. It doesn't feel good. I'm sure many people on the panel here can attest to negative comments don't feel good. But that's very different than sort of this like paralyzing or like overtaking doubt that can be present in other stuff. So that would be one of my big recommendations is you should find something um uh, in my mind, personal recommendation, find something else to anchor your worth and identity in than like the internet's view of your code. That would be a really great step towards conquering doubt and fear related to your projects.
Totally. I feel like I respect people more for their character than I do their code quality. Like, come on now. And I think a lot of hiring managers look for the same thing. Like, that's when people say, like, oh, you know, we didn't go with this candidate because they weren't a culture fit. That means they didn't like you as a person. And that's okay. But sometimes it means that you need to work on yourself a bit. Because if you have good quality of character, it means that usually you can work well with others, you can give and receive feedback well, and that means that you're going to be able to learn and adapt to this new situation a lot faster.
Yeah, particularly in a workplace, like in general, I think it's way more likely for your team and your company to succeed if people enjoy working together. It doesn't mean they have to be the bestest of friends, but like being able to be working together and trusted and things like that is a huge win over everyone being afraid of each other, and you're way more likely to ship something successful than not. For example, for those of you college or follow college football, Michigan, my favorite team, just won the national championship, and I haven't seen a team that like likes each other so much as they have in a long time. And it's very cool because you can tell that like they wanted each other to win, right? And that's a huge difference maker compared to just only wanting you to win, particularly when a project is bigger than what one person can ship. So, yeah, in Michigan's case, they didn't have any top 10 recruits for the last 4 years. So they basically, they're in this situation where they didn't have the dream team, except then they won, right? And they had a very dominating win. So it's just a really interesting sort of case study on what teamwork and believing in your team is compared to just being like, yeah, I can put this team on my back kind of situation.
Wow, Tej, do you like Michigan?
I do. Huge fan. You can ask me about any stat after this. That's my tough project this year, memorizing every play.
Wow. Well, I wanted to follow up on the thought around friends and friends who help each other or roast each other. I think some of us listening now can tell that the panelists kind of all know each other, have inside jokes, feel friendly, roasting each other, and same with the charm team as well. I would love for the panelists to talk a little bit about how you created this community for yourself. Maybe it's starting with friends, and when you do have these tough challenges to conquer, how does that play in? I have a broad question, but let's start with rocks.
Great answer, Rox.
I
Let's move on.
Nice.
No, I'm just kidding.
Brackets, silence.
Okay, no, try again.
All right, we're moving over to low level learning then.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of like the community that we found on YouTube, Twitter, whatever, comes from what Tej was saying. Where like by meeting people, talking to them, and getting to know them outside of programming, you externalize your knowledge of them as a programmer and you internalize it as a person. And you know that if you shit on that person's code, they're not going to care because you know other parts about them, right? You're not attacking who they are as a person. And when you do that, you know, you create memories or instances where you can joke about somebody's code, they don't get offended, it's a funny memory, and then you move on and do other things, right? So it's just like Tej kind of said, getting your self-image away from I am just a programmer, I am only my code, to I'm a person who also codes.
Yeah, totally. I also think it's like once you have a certain level of comfort with other people in the space, you can ask them dumb questions and have them tell you that's a stupid question and not be upset by it. Like it's a good reality check when you've got people that are in your circle. Let's move on to Moss. Do you want to try answering that? Moss, sorry, I don't know why I said anyway. You try again.
Yeah, for sure. I think just just to piggyback off what Low Level said, just treating like you can have that level of comfort to criticize someone's like code if you are like know them on a like deeper level. So like with our team, for example, like we play like charm games and we have like these fun banters during team meetings, and then we can talk about kind of projects like more candidly and have like a more safe space to like talk more freely instead of like walking on eggshells. And because you know that the other person has like good intentions, they want to make you a better programmer, or they want to improve your code quality, they want the whole team to win. Um, it's it's kind of easier to give feedback when it's in like a safe space community wise. Another thing I will mention on like the community, like I haven't built, or like I'm not as much part of communities as some of the other panelists who have like Twitch kind of communities and stuff like that. But um, the best thing I found is like finding people with similar interests. So like for me personally, I'm a huge like terminal nerd and like Vim lover, like Neo Vim lover, like everything terminal. So in university, my friends and I could roast each other's code because we were all like very like loving of the terminal, and like we were always trying to improve. I remember we would play like me and my four like kind of closest friends would play like Vim golf and like kind of poke fun at like each other if we did something inefficiently in Vim, like, oh, you use too many keystrokes, and just like it was all like kind of out of love and like just kind of fun because we were like very good, like very tightly like knit, and we were like always wanting to push each other. Sometimes like very like jokingly and being like, "Oh, you took too long. Like, stop mashing the J H L keys," and like we would improve from that. Like, it wasn't like um, very good feedback where like it would be like like, oh hey, you could do this better. It was more like we would poke fun at each other, like we all knew like we had good intentions, and we would improve and like we would become better programmers, better developers through that sort of like similar interests and all that.
I love it.
Test.
I'd love to try test. I'd love to try and hear from Rox. Keyword try.
Yeah, thanks. Hello. Sorry, this cable is genuinely ancient and keeps falling out of the microphone, and then I have to fully reconnect because yeah. Anyway, um I think there's two kind of sides to this coin. Having people around you that support you is and do the same thing you do is way more important than people give it credit for. Like, you know, me and Tej and Bash on Twitch, and then like we, people start doing YouTube, we start a community, get to meet low level, also doing that kind of stuff, right? Like, and then we all support each other, and there's like these little discords and the group chats and everything. There's a huge difference between like I'm fighting the world and my doubt and all of these things by myself, and I have a bunch of friends and we're all trying to figure it out. And if I have some like marketing thing I'm not sure about, or I don't get how to do this code, I can like send it into a group chat, and then somebody will be like, "This is the worst garbage I've ever written. Here's how you fix it. Also, I hate you, but I love you." And you're fine, right? And life's good. And you all move a lot faster because of it. And I feel like it's kind of the same in a team, like I embedded with this podcast for like 3 weeks. They wanted to like build some tech products. I jumped into their team, and I immediately just started joking around with all of them, because I was like, okay, cool. There's two scenarios here. I either come in, I am a different person. I have to like really struggle by myself on all of these things, or I very quickly try and become friends with these people, like put us on the same page, try and get them on my team so they're interested in what I'm up to. And then it feels like we're all kind of collaborating on a thing. And all of a sudden I'm able to get the help that I want. And we're all joking around and making fun of each other and all those kinds of things. So, there's kind of two things at play there. There's sort of like the psychological safety of being around people who you can mess around with and who can be honest with you, which me, Bash, Teach, and Prime had like a 4-hour pod. 4 hour.
Rox, you just cut out for me.
Same.
Okay, good. I thought that spaced out again. I was like,
Uh-oh. We love spacing.
Well, he was probably about to reveal some secrets that we don't. What we had a 4-hour what, Rox? What did we do?
It's probably live on stream leaking our DMs right now.
Yeah, let me just reading off DMs from 3 years ago. You guys will not believe what they said about me.
We'll have to have Rox on again. This is tragic. Yeah. His mic is against him.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing about this too, for like building a community. And this isn't, it's not, I wouldn't say it's unique to building a community. This is actually for like most relationships in your life. But we'll talk about it in the context of community here, which is like, if you imagine what the kind of community is that you would like to be a part of, then you need to think about what kind of person would fit well in that community, and then figure out like what parts of that you're not doing as well as you'd like at are, right? So if you want your community to be part of one that's supportive of people, then you should find out how to be a more supportive person, right? 'Cause then you're way more likely to end up in that kind of community, right? And you find ways that you're willing, like if you want other people to be able to joke around, you need to be able to take a joke, right? And when someone teases you, or says that they, think your code isn't as good as whatever, right? And they're like all laughing and we're all having fun, then you got to be like, oh yeah, like duh, I want to do this. I want to be in a group that does this. So this is the part where I need to find this funny, or it's not the right kind of community, right? Otherwise, you're not looking for friendly banter. You're looking for ways to put other people down, right? Those are very different communities. One is fun to be in and one is not, right? So you sort of need to be thinking about those qualities, and then thinking about the qualities that you have, and do they match up, and what can you do to become more aligned with those, right? Because you can like become more willing to laugh at yourself. Like it's possible. I can tell you, after streaming for like a long time, I was pretty good at laughing at myself before, but I laugh at myself a lot now. Or like if you have a kid, you definitely start laughing at yourself more. But streaming's a little easier to get into. So anyways, that's just a piece of advice. I think that's helpful for building communities.
I love it. Does anyone have any final thoughts on that before I move on to the next question?
Podcast. It was a 4-hour podcast.
Oh, thanks for closing the loop on that, Rox.
Gotcha.
Okay. The last question that I have for all the panelists is, when you are dealing with one of these big monolith projects and you have to try and figure out what that next step is, and you're really not sure what that is, what kind of resources are your favorite to use that are at your disposal that others might be able to learn from? I'll start with Moss.
Yeah, for sure. So when I'm tackling like a big monolithic project and it's just I'm not sure where to go next. I usually like just personally like to first take a break um, and and just like kind of reevaluate just like what I need to do and just take like a little breather to like learn like what am I missing. I'm usually like missing something, like a missing piece. Um, but the resources that I go to the most are like just learning like through books, through watching like YouTube videos, learning new stuff, learning different technologies. Like if I'm truly stuck on a project, I find like learning about other things can sometimes help you like kind of just make connections that you wouldn't see otherwise. So if I'm learning about like uh, just some random, I don't have like a concrete example, but if I'm working on a project and I learned something about like something completely unrelated, but I somehow just managed to connect some dots, like read a book, find some hidden piece of information that's like because we have so much access to information, sometimes it helps. I'm not saying like that's like the best, most optimal strategy, but I've just noticed it works for me sometimes. But other than that, like concretely, I would say like ask for help. So like people have like none of your problems are really that unique. Um, you can have people that like your boss, your coworkers, um, they've probably faced the same problems that you have. So if you're truly stuck, like if you're writing, let's say like a Kubernetes clone, maybe you can ask for like help from like the open source community that's already done that, or like unless you're building something like truly new, someone's probably faced the same challenges that you have. And if you are building something truly new, I feel like learning about different fields and different information can help you like connect dots to build what you're like building. I'm not sure if that made sense, but it made sense in my head.
That totally made sense. I love the idea of using the information as inspiration. I think that's really interesting. I've never really thought of it that way. Would you say like because you're building a language server, right? Would you say that
Yeah,
when you're looking up these like YouTube videos or books, are they things that are like related to like directly related to like, hey, building a language server, or is it about just like I don't know what else is relevant to a language server, but like kind of adjacent topics that serve as
yeah,
inspiration?
yeah, that's so yeah, the language server project that I'm building for the DSL actually came about just by watching like a conference talk. So I was just like watching like Go for Con and just like came across a video about like language servers and how they work. And I'm like, oh, it would be cool to write a language server. And then I just watched the talk. So even the idea for the project, like I didn't really intend to write a language server for the language, um, but it came about by like me just like randomly being on YouTube, watching like different stuff, and then coming across a language server protocol video, seeing how cool it is, like what you can do with it, um, and then kind of then diving, and then the resources are available, right? Like once I know this is what I want to build, like you can read the spec, you can people have built, like I mentioned before, like people have built language servers. You can like look at reference code. You can see how everything works. So I think that yeah, the information was inspiration for the project. Um, but after that, the next steps are just like looking at other people, how they solve the problem, what new stuff that uh, I want to introduce, and just kind of going through that.
It's kind of similar to like for beginners, it's like when you're following a tutorial and you're like, hey, maybe I want to write this to a database instead of writing it locally or whatever, right? Like there's different little tweaks that you can make along the way where it's like you get to learn from someone else's experience and be inspired by that, but then tweak it to be exactly what you want. And those are like the small, manageable sized additions that you want to make to the project to make it your own. I love that. Okay, I will ask low level as well. I want to hear from every single panelist, so we're going to go through everyone with this same question. And the question was like basically when you're trying to figure out next steps, what tools and technologies do you have in your arsenal that you lean towards?
Yeah, so I think it depends how stuck I am and for how long I've been stuck. I would say the first one is just try harder, keep trying. You know what I mean? Like if I find that I'm stuck, okay, maybe I just got to grind a little bit harder. If I'm bashing my head for pun intended, actually bashing my head for more than like an hour over the same problem, I actually like to walk away from the computer and like literally go touch grass. Um, I find myself I get tunnel vision really, 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 really bad. And if I don't step away and force myself to like unthink about the problem, I'll never solve anything. So I find that most of the time, like if I'm really stuck, just go for like a 20-minute walk and then the problem will just like appear in my head. If that doesn't work, go talk to friends, go talk to people that I know that have worked in the same problem and they often have some experience that I haven't had. That'll give me a new insight. So those are kind of like my 1, 2, 3 process.
I love that. I use naps for a similar thing. Like this is a lot.
That's
I'm gonna
great
go
too.
lie
Yeah.
down. There's a lot of science to back it as well, like going for walks or doing something where your subconscious kind of starts it continues to problem solve, but it doesn't take as much energy and effort as like when you're consciously trying to solve the problem. And
Yeah,
often you
that's like the
come
basis
back.
of shower thoughts, right? Like you have in the shower, you have nothing. You can't use your phone, you can't talk to people, you're completely alone with your thoughts, and then suddenly, boom, the solution pops, you know?
Yeah, totally. Totally. Okay, let's hear from Rox next. If we get to be graced by his beautiful voice.
Let's find out. How am I doing?
Great, we can hear you.
Yeah.
You're not talking into the void. Proud of you.
Hooray! Um, learning new stuff is really tough. Uh, I don't have like a lot of particular resources. I mean, ChatGPT was really good for a while, then it got kind of bad again. Um, I think I like kind of what Moss said of like inspiration becomes a thing. Like, I don't know. I can't think of a way to say that without sounding like uh an ass, but getting inspired by like random other stuff ends up like really helping me kind of like reframe problems in my head a lot of the time. Uh, so like for example, if I'm trying to do some marketing and I have no idea how to do marketing, I'll just go listen to a bunch of random stories of like podcasts of how people did some crazy business crap, and then I'll be like, oh, I could apply 1/10 of that to my scenario. But there's also things where it's really helpful if you know somebody or if you can find somebody, and a lot of people are willing to answer questions, especially on the internet. You know, like for example, TGDV over here is an open source legend. And Teej's favorite thing is when people tag him on Twitter and say, "Hey, at Teej, I have a question about open source," and then he will answer it, guaranteed. It's actually in his contract with Twitter. So things like that are really helpful. But genuinely, a lot of the time people used to tag me and a lot of us when they had like random questions, and most of the time we'd go through and we'd answer them because you're happy to help. So I think finding people who are like willing to help you out, who know what's up or who have some recommendations. I mean, last week I didn't know how to do something with framing a really complicated contract, and I literally said, "Does anybody know anybody?" And Bash was like, "You should talk to Jay-Z." I talked to Jay-Z. Turns out Jay-Z's a freaking genius about it. Answered everything within 10 minutes. It would have taken me, many hours otherwise. So a lot of the time, like a basic human connection uh, can really help you get over a hurdle of information you might not even know how to get. Is just find somebody who seems like they're an expert and just be like, hey, not like, hey, how do I do a startup, as a cold Twitter DM? Maybe not that much. But if you're like, hey, at Tej, I have this very specific open source question, you can probably get that solved, Like, hey, how do you think about this versus that in terms of languages? You can get that solved. So if you can get to the point of asking a good enough question, you can usually get it answered by somebody deep on that topic on the internet. If you're willing to take the bet on actually asking. So would recommend that for questions and or just being resourceful for inspiration of like adjacent stuff.
And on that note, 2 points. First of all, thank you, Rox. I am definitely not a genius, so far from it, but happy to help. I do want to say that the art of asking the right question is is actually something that I think when you phrased it right, you've answered a lot of the question, or you know what to search for either online or asking someone. So even the practice of crafting what question can I ask this expert is something to consider. And then the second point, I actually do want to think of and plug the panelists we have here on the resources that they just provide out and in the open. I know low level learning is huge on YouTube. Bash is big on YouTube. And I know Tej and Rocks are huge on Twitch and probably YouTube and other forums as well. So even just the panelists here, and Mas is putting himself, all on open source and on Reddit, and doing very well. So even just the panelists here are great resources for those listening to get started.
We'll just hear from TJ as well on the, also thanks Jay-Z. Sorry, I'm like, my brain is out so many places. Thank you, Jay-Z, for that. It was great hearing your insights as well. Crafting questions, huge. We should probably talk about that in another episode. I would love to hear from TJ what some of his strategies are for unblocking himself and what resources he leans on for that.
Yeah, just as a quick aside before we get to that, I think when you're asking someone a question, probably the best thing that you can do is find a way to show that you value their time in answering your question. That's just like a piece of advice that I think will take you a long way in asking other people questions. If it's something really dumb that you should have Googled, then you should have Googled it first. And then if you did and you didn't understand, then you can just say, like, I tried this and this. These two things didn't work. So now I'm wondering if you have, right, those kind of things. Then it shows at least you're not treating someone like a human Google. So it's a really effective way of asking questions and getting answers. But to answer about how to get unblocked from stuff, particularly in the realm of software dev, if it's like you're trying, in the case of like trying to solve some particular problem or answer some particular thing, I'm going to suggest something pretty controversial, which is consider reading the docs. I know that it's not very popular. I'm aware this might be the last time allowed to show my face on the internet after such a controversial take, but that would be my recommendation. Most people, when they read it, they're actually just like, they're just seeing words, but they're not reading. They're not focusing and paying attention, walking through, going slow, checking the examples, making sure you understand the examples, etc. Right? So like you need to do that, and then if that doesn't work, then I would suggest the even more controversial take, which is, how can I read the source code to the thing that I'm trying to figure out and understand? And that's the next level one, even more controversial. I know. Sorry to do back-to-back hot takes at the end of this, super controversial, but those would be sort of the two ways that I often find myself being able to get unblocked, which is that I probably didn't read the first time. Or I probably didn't understand it correctly. And lots of answers are found in the docs or in the source code directly. I've answered tons and tons of problems on my own, and much more quickly than waiting for an answer from someone else by doing that. And you really like up level yourself as an engineer when you do those things. So that's like, I also agree with like basically all the advice as well said earlier. So those are all good points. That's just one that I didn't hear yet.
I love it. Quick question. How do you read the source code? How do you navigate that source code effectively where you can do so in a realistic amount of time and actually understand how the design of the software and how they all tie in?
It really varies question to question. I mean, like in general, there's probably some outline somewhere that gives you a broad overview of a project. And it really depends if you have some like small micro problem versus some large macro problem. But like stepping through in your editor, if your editor has like the sources installed for the libraries that you're doing, or using something like SourceGraph, of course, that's where I was working, or GitHub search or something like that, to search through and actually find like examples of the thing that you're using. And then just, oh my goodness, there's like an optional flag that I didn't pass that like I'm seeing everyone else passing. That's obviously why it's not, these kinds of things, you find those from actually like going and searching for those, although those are generally sort of like smaller micro problems of solving. But usually you solve big problems by solving lots of small problems first. So it's still effective strategy for getting to the big problem. But lots of projects have a really good set of docs that people just don't read. So you can usually get a good overview of the project by just like reading top to bottom. I'm learning Laravel for fun on stream, and I nearly finished reading the entire PHP 8 spec, like just reading the whole thing for PHP 8 off stream. And it turns out you learn a lot of stuff doing that. It's really effective for learning lots of things fast. So that's what I would recommend. Like, I want to build a project in this, so I'm just going to read the whole thing, and then I'll know a lot more when I'm done.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I've definitely shot myself in the foot by skipping over different parts of docs at like when I was learning it, and then realizing that shortcoming in the future, not ideal. I actually do a very similar thing to you with source code, using SourceGraph to find examples of how maybe that library is being used in other places. It's so valuable because a lot of places, a lot of repos like won't provide that many examples, or they're really simple examples, which honestly, fair enough. It's coming up with examples is a lot of work. It's pretty challenging, but it is great that we have something like SourceGraph to really just, you can do global search and just search through like every repo that is open source. And if they're using this one function from this library, like it's great. That being said, does anyone have any final comments that they like to say? Otherwise, I'm just going to close out the space and do a little outro here.
Thanks for having us, Bash and Jay-Z.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks,
Appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
Thanks everyone for making it. And we look up to all of you as developers. So I really appreciate you sharing your expertise with everyone in the audience and with us, the panelists. It was honestly, I mean, we brought you on because we think you're cool, and anyone else can just get wrecked. So that was great. And I learned a lot from this chat. I feel like these are a lot of questions that a lot of people encounter, and especially with these really intimidating projects. Like I heard Moss recently was working on that language server, and I'm like, I could never. Is literally the first thought that came up. I was like, I could never. And then I was like, okay, that's not, for one, not a great mindset. Two, I wonder how he did it. And I know that there's a few other people that are building some pretty tough stuff in the open. How do they do it? So that's what inspired this topic. And I really hope you all enjoyed the first episode of the new Charm podcast, Dev Null. It will be getting redistributed to other platforms once I get that all set up. In the meantime, you can view the recording on YouTube. It will be available over there on the Charm YouTube channel. And big shout out to Jay-Z, who has just signed up with a big event that she's going to be doing in the summertime. If I'm not mistaken, you can check out more details on that on the Charm Twitter. Jay-Z, if you want to give a quick shout out to your new event, let us know.
Yeah, just a real quick, it was just announced this morning. I'm speaking at the Merge in Berlin, which is a developer experience conference that's founded and run by the founder of GitHub, Scott Chaikin, and there'll be a whole bunch of open source prolific people, and I'm lucky to be a part of that. So those in Europe, come through. It'll be a party.
Huge. Proud of you, Jay-Z. That's going to be super exciting. And thank you to everyone for joining us for the space, even when we had to create a new space. Really appreciate that. The scuff is it's all part of the fun. Okay, just keeping you on your toes.
Can't believe you didn't say it's part of the charm, Bash. Come on. Okay.
Sorry, DJ. We'll edit out what I said and put you in there instead. Okay, for the charm.
Sweet, perfect. Thanks.
Thank you. Yep. So for those of you who are interested in hearing our next episode, that will be happening every single month on the second Thursday of the month. And we'll be doing it live. And then, of course, all the recordings will be available as well. Yeah. Thanks, everyone, for your time and for chiming in. I'm excited. Now I feel like I can take on the world. Google, here I come. I'm gonna rewrite Google in Rust.
Thank you again, everyone.
Thanks. Love you, Teach. I hope my mic's working.
Lots of love to
we can
rocks.
hear you.
We bullied you.
I love you.
We appreciate you.
Bye.
Bye.